I believe it's a spiritual ascension stargate. The Great Pyramid, a lot of people say, oh, it's a power plant. It's a musical instrument. It's a place of burial, right? And maybe metaphorically, it's death, burial, and resurrection. Is it, a place of whatever else? The last thing I don't believe it is a place for pharaohs.
Welcome to the Awaken magazine podcast, where we feature inspiring leaders who are helping our world awaken to love. I'm your host, David Trotter, and today I want to share with you a mind-blowing conversation with Robert Edward Grant. He is a serial entrepreneur, he's a polymath, prolific inventor, and the host of Code X on Gaia. This was recorded live at our very first in-person Awakened event here in Southern California. The lighting was a little dim inside of Behind the Lids, but I believe that you will absolutely love all that Robert has to share. We dive into his own journey of awakening. We talk about recent discoveries underneath the Egyptian pyramids, and he also helps us connect the King's Chamber with the work of Leonardo da Vinci. So if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Awaken magazine podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Click subscribe, rate, and review the show. That's an easy way for you to help us spread the word about these great interviews that we release each and every week. All right, let's dive into this conversation with Robert Edward Grant. Well, we're definitely going to dive into your work tonight.
Okay.
But I want to hear a bit about your story, how you awoke to consciousness, mindfulness, spirituality. Did you grow up in some home that had faith or spirituality, or did that come later in life?
I always felt like this affinity, I guess, and I felt like there was more to life than what I was living, even from probably around the time that I was 3 or 4 years old. But, and then I had other moments in time where I had like deep and important spiritual experiences that I can look back on now. I didn't understand how the dots connected until I could see them in the retrospect. And one of them was when I was 11 years old. I lived in a place called Rendlesham Forest in 1980, which there's a famous, very well-known UFO incident that happened there. It was in my backyard. And my father was in the Air Force. He was at Brentwater Air Force Base right there. And so from that moment in time, I started getting all kinds of strange experiences, I guess, throughout my whole life. But I ended up meeting a girl in high school, and every major life change came, I think, because I started with that sentence. And she was the homecoming queen. She was Mormon, so I ended up joining the Mormon church. And next thing I know, I find myself in Seoul in Korea. And I was a Mormon missionary for 2 years. And it was a great experience. I have no regrets having done it, but I'm no longer in the Mormon church. But I definitely learned a lot through the process of that. And that also, in many ways, got me deep into scripture, got me deep into studying world religions, because I had to learn all the different religions. And I was always fascinated by it. But it wasn't probably until around 2010 that I had my real spiritual awakening, 2010, 2011, maybe even as early as 2008. I started noticing that a lot of the experience I was having in my outer world were just mirroring what was happening in my inner world. And I started noticing also that, strangely, the things that I had been judging, both in myself and the outer world, were basically just coming back to me over and over and over again. And that was when I started asking, instead of asking the question of why does something happen to me, I started asking, why did I choose this?
Mm-hmm. A bit about your work. I know I have heard you speak about math in a way that someone would talk about their favorite movie or their favorite television show. I mean, it's like, you're just like, yes, and numbers just flow out of your mouth. And for a lot of us, math is a little cold, maybe analytical, maybe, I don't want to be offensive, but boring, right? Okay. That was the subject in high school. That was the only subject in high school I got B's in. All right. So math has been my downfall. I guess I would say, what moment did you realize that numbers were more than just numbers for you? Like when there was a deeper meaning for you in numbers and mathematics?
Well, first I'll just say that I think a lot of people have had some bad experiences with the way they learn mathematics, because I think mathematics is taught without meaning, and everything in the scientific method and everything in science in general is leading us away from pattern, leading us away from some sort of higher consciousness that might actually be putting it all together. And so because of that, we learn math without meaning, and math without meaning is just information. That's why it's so hard to learn. But when you realize that not only is there meaning behind it, but when we finally understand the meaning behind it, that it's connected to everything, that it becomes a language that basically ties and connects literally everything, then you start thinking, well, wait a minute. So geometry is just the music we experience with our eyes, right? And you start realizing that, wait, the left temporal lobe is where I process mathematics, but the right for people that are right-handed, but the right temporal lobe is where I process music. It's just a mirror reflection. And geometry is right in the center. And then you start realizing, but wait, isn't music just the basis of chemistry? Yes. And then that means it's just, the way that we experience mathematics through our ears. So all of this, then biology and everything else basically connects into one whole. Because applied mathematics is geometry, applied geometry is physics, applied physics is chemistry, applied chemistry is biology, applied biology is psychology, applied psychology is sociology, and applied sociology is philosophy, and applied philosophy is mathematics. All of it is one whole, and we're being taught that it's all separate. So I think if we start learning from the context that it's all part of the same language, and whose language is it? Source creator's language. So it's a beautiful language, and we finally understand the meaning of math. It becomes divine communication.
I want to help us. Yeah, right? I'm like, okay. So basically what you're saying is math is cool. All right.
Math is definitely cool.
Okay. All right.
And by the way, it's definitely showing up everywhere now. Mm-hmm. If you haven't noticed, like you go to a restaurant, it's become very popular to have lighting that's all geometric, platonic solids, for example. Like you might see an icosahedron-shaped lantern, or you might see a dodecahedral-shaped lantern. We're seeing this stuff showing up everywhere in hotel lobbies because it's part of the consciousness that's raising right now of everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful to me.
One of the things that I definitely am so attracted to your work is that you see things that other people don't see. And then you make connections that other people perhaps don't make. And that's a lot of what Code X is about. If you guys are not familiar with Gaia, it's like a Netflix of like spiritual conscious content. I want to help us see through your eyes a bit tonight, some things. And so I've prepared some images. And so the first image is of the Giza Plateau, right? You've been here many times.
Many.
Oh, when you go there, what do you feel? What do you sense?
Well, I could tell you the first time I went, I was there on a trip with a friend of mine, Nassim Haramein, who's a physicist, and I just had been waiting my whole life. I'd already been to over 100, 30 countries around that time, but I'd never been to Egypt because I was supposed to go to Egypt on a special trip in 2010, and then there was like this whole bus of Germans that got massacred in this bizarre type of, terrorist attack. And so then I had to cancel the trip at that time, and I hadn't gotten a chance to go, but I ended up going exactly at the right time for me. And all of you at some point in time will probably feel some calling to go to Egypt. And I think it's something that's actually part of your DNA. It just somehow gets into you, and you don't just go once. You end up going many times. And that was my experience. So I went there, and just the awe of looking at the Great Pyramid, I was like, and I'd already done a ton of research on it. It already called me. I'd already done all the mathematical analysis of it. I understood all the math constants that were embedded within it. I already knew a lot about Egypt and about Egyptology as a result of just this interest that had, from the time of my awakening, had already started to be the precursor to my actual visit. Mm-hmm. So I had this amazing experience. And in fact, I'd watched this film on YouTube at some point, and it said that you go to Egypt and you might actually pass out. So I was like, okay, what's that going to be all about? And so this guy said, find this rock in the pyramid and you might connect with this rock. And so, of course, I see a rock. I see a big stone up on the pyramid, and I'm like, I'm going to go up there and touch the stone. So you're not allowed to climb the pyramid, right? So police show up right around you in no time flat. There's this German couple went up once and climbed up there and went to the top and made love at the top of the pyramid, and they videotaped it, posted it on YouTube. And they got extradited back and thrown in jail. So now no one's allowed to go on the pyramid anymore because this one couple did this. But it is kind of a dangerous climb.
We can't have anything nice.
No, we can't have anything nice. We can't have anything nice. So basically, I found this rock, and I went up to touch this rock, and nothing happened. I was like, well, probably a good idea because I'm on the side of this pyramid, and I'd probably gone up like 30 or 40 feet. And I thought if I did pass out, it might not be good anyway. Like I'd fall down the side of the pyramid or something. But then later that day, we went to Saqqara, which has these 24 sarcophagi, right, that are huge. Each one of them weighs between 80 and 100 tons, and no one knows how they got them down into this, cavern area. And the energy was so strong in there. It was amazing. And this woman came up to me, and I don't think I've ever told this story publicly. So this woman came up to me and she says, oh, I'm a big follower of your work mathematically. And this is in 2017. And she said, I'm a shapeshifter. And I knew this trip was going to be wild. It was with Nassim Haramein after all. So I was like, I think I'm going to meet some aliens or something. This is going to be wild. So she was wearing like a tank top, and she was only like 5 feet tall. She was super small. And she said, I can make my arms grow about 8 inches. So I'm like, okay, let's go. So she puts her arms out like this, and I'm not kidding you, they grew 8 inches right in front of me. Her skin stretched and everything. It was like something out of an 80s horror movie. And like her hand became like 3 fingers. And I was like, so I went to my assistant who was also on the trip, and I said, Victoria, I'm like, you got to check this out. I start walking around, and the energy in the Serapeum, where those sarcophagi are, is so strong that literally that and the energy in that place, I was just boom, out. So I'm out for 5 minutes. I'm out. I wake up, and the Sim's pouring water on my face, and someone's got an electric fan, and this woman's on top of me, straddling me, like literally straddling me and speaking light language. And I come to, and I'm like, what the heck? And she's like, and there was another woman who was on the trip, and she's like, let go of his solar plexus, release his solar plexus. And I was like,
in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. She's like, he's married. Get off of him. I was like, what the heck is this? So I wake up to this, and then people were asking me, it's like, what was that device that guy had over your face? I'm like, it was just a fan. It was like that. It was wild. I'm telling you, it was so wild. But later that week, we went inside the Great Pyramid, and I'd given a lecture there on math as, a language of the universe. It was supposed to be 2 hours. It went for 4 hours, and people were crying at the end. I'm like, I expected them to be crying, but from boredom. And they were crying because they had a spiritual experience from learning the language of math. And I was like stunned by that. And that night we went into the Great Pyramid, and afterwards I was laying on the rocks outside of on the Giza Plateau, right in front of the Great Pyramid. We're looking up at the stars. There were about 50 of us laying out there. There was still a whole group, because there was like 175 of us on the trip. There was a whole group that was still in the pyramid. We could still hear them because the pyramid's like a giant speaker. We could literally hear them Om chanting outside the pyramid. It's a 13-acre structure, right? Because it's literally resonating like that. And I look up and I'm like, oh, look at the stars. And I'm like, those aren't stars. There are 75 ships on top of us doing formations. And none of us were on drugs. Well, maybe 1 or 2, but I was not one of them. And I'm telling you, that night I was visited by Arcturians, and the rest became history. I went back 6-7 months later. I knew I was going to discover something. And that's when I discovered the Alpha Omega on the rim of the sarcophagus. I've been drawing it all week in my notebooks. And I knew at that moment, because the way I discovered it was I remembered being there when it was placed there. And I knew exactly where to look for it. And it was like this memory. And I saw this blue-green light going over, like melting the sarcophagus, putting it in the rim at this exact location. And then I looked, and one of my friends was laying in the sarcophagus, home chanting, and then I looked at the exact spot where it was, and there it was. And I was like, and I knew enough to know that there's no writing and stuff in the pyramid, that there's, very, very little information that we can glean from the builders as to what the purpose of the pyramid was. Mm-hmm. So that was that moment.
Okay, so there have been some recent developments that have been breaking news in the last month or so. And these scans have come out called the synthetic aperture radar, the SAR tomography, right? It looks like this. I don't know if any of you have seen this online. There's a big press conference about a month ago. And here are some renderings that people have made. And these scans are scanning under which pyramid?
Khafre, the second pyramid.
And what are we looking at? What are they proposing is happening underneath the pyramid?
So synthetic aperture radar is a radar that uses satellites to send pings into the Earth. And what it does is it measures the echoes that come back from the Earth. This has been used in a way that's like optical coherence tomography, which is an area that I have some expertise in. I've developed some technologies related to. We use it to scan the retina to see the thickness of a retina without having to actually go inside the eye. MRI is not really perfect enough to be able to see that. And to have an MRI to do that, very, very expensive. So we would use it to measure the thickness of retina so we could figure out exactly how much glaucoma someone's suffering from, or what challenges they've got, like age-related macular degeneration, which you might have a big proliferation of blood vessels in the back of the eye. And so they figured out a way to advance this technology to use it in this way as a ground-penetrating radar. It's totally new. So no one's really done this before. This is a totally new thing. I know NASA was starting to work in this area too, and they're trying to work on it in the new Da Vinci program to go to Venus and send a probe to Venus. And what's interesting about this is that they showed that there were up to 2 kilometers of pillars that go beneath the Khafre pyramid, the second pyramid on the Giza Plateau. And also it looks like they have some sort of structure going around the outside of them. It looks to be like some sort of spiral, almost like a spring, but they don't know exactly what it is. The way that it comes back like this, and it tells you there is something there. We don't know what that something is per se, but there has to be something there because this is based on the differential. They measure these minute differences between regular dirt and bedrock, right? And limestone and granite and everything else. And those minute differences show up on the scan. And then at the very base of this as well, they have these 2 very large cube-shaped caverns that could literally fit 64,000 people in each of them.
Amazing. Now, a little over a year and a half ago, you brought to the attention a drawing by Da Vinci that has some similarity. Mm-hmm. Talk to us about this drawing on the left. When was it made by Da Vinci, and what do you think is happening in the drawing?
Well, we don't have a date, but this is called Folio 134 that's in Codex Atlanticus. And I'd already found that Da Vinci, there is and we'll come back to it in a little bit, but there's a letter that Da Vinci wrote that was a letter to the Lieutenant Devedar, the Sultan of Cairo, Babylon. The original name of Cairo was not Cairo, it was Babylon. And today, there's still, the old town of Cairo is still called Babylon. So that's an important thing. Put a pin in that because I just posted about this today, that they're now saying that if there was ever a Garden of Eden, it would have been actually in Egypt. So this was a peer-reviewed journal article that came out in the Journal of Archaeological Discovery that basically is now asserting that the Garden of Eden would have had to have been in Egypt. But having said that, what I noticed was that I was flipping through the pages and I already found several of these paintings from the time Da Vinci was in Egypt from 1482, late 1482 until late 1486. And these are the exact same years that Da Vinci was missing from all Italian history. He was famous his entire life. So if you read Walter Isaacson's book, the biography about Leonardo da Vinci, he talks about the missing years. Nobody knows where he went. Well, actually, Da Vinci said where he was but no one believed it. He said he went on this, trek. In this letter he wrote to the Cairo, the Sultan, or the Lieutenant Devatdar of the Sultan of Cairo. Why would he be writing a letter to the Sultan of Cairo? In it, he talks about having gone to survey the great Mount Taurus. The Mount Taurus is actually a reference to the Great Pyramid, because the original name of the Great Pyramid was Bull Mountain. And the Giza Plateau was not called Giza, it was called Rostau. Egyptian is read from right to left. What is Rostau backwards? Taurus. Okay, and he talks about 3 peaks on these mountains, and they're covered with limestone, and they're perfectly oriented north. He's talking about the pyramid complex. And all of the references that he put in there are all encrypted, because back in those days, you had to encrypt all of your letters. So what I found was that all his paintings are encrypted with Egyptological information, esoteric mysticism, right? And the stuff like Kabbalistic. And every painting from 1486 onward and illustration is tied to this Egypt story.
So this image here on the left
is Khafre Pyramid. So the second pyramid, I had not found this until about a year ago. Slipping through my book, Codex Atlanticus, and I find folio 134, and I notice immediately, I'm like, wait a minute. That's not just any angle. That's exactly Khafre Pyramid's angle, which is 3/4, 3 being 1/2 the base and the height being 4. That proportion is actually what we call the inverted relationship of a perfect fourth in music. It would be like C to F in music. And all the pyramids on Giza make musical notes. And that's what determines their exact slope angle, right? So the slope angle is based on the height proportion versus the 1/2 base proportion, the right triangle within it. And what I mapped all of that and found was that it's all a musical scale, the entire thing. So the 3 pyramids on Giza Plateau actually make this sound, but not, it's in our vision, right? So it's da, 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 da. I thought it was going to be da, 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 bum, bum. But it wasn't. So in looking at this, though, I went back after the story broke on the SAR scan by Biondi and Malanga and Armando May. And I wanted to go and look to see if Da Vinci had put anything inside this proportionality. Now, I'd already looked a year ago and found that the caverns that he put inside that pyramid in his drawing matched exactly the location of the real pyramid's actual caverns and like inner structures. And so I was like, and maybe some new spots that we didn't know about, because he did the same thing. He cryptid in the Vitruvian Man, the Great Pyramid, and missing chambers, or, unknown location chambers. So I went back this year, though, and looked back and said, I wonder if he put anything under the structure. And this is what he did. If you look at it, there are pylons that go down deep beneath the pyramid structure. And he wrote in there as well, the very first line, he was not supposed to have ever gone to Egypt, according to mainstream belief and art historians that all think he was gay. He wasn't gay, by the way, just so you know. And that's another thing that happens. We all see the world not as it is, but as we are. So when you have art historians who are gay that wanted to have a hero, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's the way they want to basically do it or say it. They can. Yes, he experimented a few things, but he definitely was heterosexual too. So the point is, though, that if we look at this painting or this depiction, you can see pylons that go straight down. And more than that, the structure of that is in the shape of the Sephirot. The Sephirot is the tree of life. So it's literally 3 Sephirot that go straight down for 2 kilometers.
So now let's talk about, what's the transition? Right? What's my transition? I want you guys to see some of the layers here. All right, so this is another depiction. I don't know if you guys have seen this online of like a rendering of what the possibilities could be underneath based on the scans. So this room, right? You've been in this room many times.
Many.
Yes.
I spent 20 nights in the Great Pyramid. 5 of them by myself.
So inside the King's Chamber, there are things that you see that maybe the average person doesn't see. And so there's connection that you had just referenced between Da Vinci's The Last Supper and the Vitruvian Man. I'd love to go through both of these paintings very briefly because we've only got a few minutes. Mm-hmm. But if we look at this painting, overlaid on top of this painting is what?
Is the King's Chamber. So the King's Chamber with the correct proportion associated with it, you just marry up the top from where the ceiling meets the back wall. It's a 2-to-1 rectangle, the room is, and the height from floor to ceiling is not a perfect cube shape because it's taking the diagonal on the floor from the center point to the outer corner and then just popping that up and making it a height. So it's literally the proportions of the 2-to-1 rectangle. So it's telling us something about the 2-to-1 rectangles being really important. But I just noticed this as I was watching it on Codex Season 2. First of all, we found exactly in the spot where there is a eye of Ra that's in the pediment above Jesus, right? And by the way, the windowsill actually makes the name of God. So the shape of the windowsill, and you could see the portion of the windowsill. On the right window is Yod, the middle one is Hey, and the other one is Vav on the left. It's just backwards. Yod Hey Vav is the name of God. Now, what's also interesting is you'll see the sarcophagus fits perfectly inside that little portal thing that's covering up the feet of Jesus too, which is kind of a strange thing that's kind of conspicuously out of place, right? And then also notice that the tapestries are lining up perfectly to the actual blocks in the room, as well as the table itself in perfect perspective with the blocks in the room. So this is fascinating. So it's already been well known that the Last Supper painting is encoding the astrological symbols. The 12 apostles are associated with the astrological symbols, the zodiac, just as the 12 tribes of Israel were associated with the astrological symbols. All of the encampment at the tabernacle were all the flags of all of the different zodiac signs. So why is that? Well, maybe because the Ark of the Covenant at one time was in the sarcophagus. It fits perfectly inside of it. That's what I believe it is. But on the back wall of the King's Chamber, in the exact same spot where the Last Supper painting has the pediment that's shaped like the Eye of Ra, you can see the faint outline of an Eye of Ra. It's been scrubbed off. The walls have literally been scrubbed, and they're scrubbed often. They think they're cleaning it like a bathroom. When COVID hit, they literally were scrubbing the whole pyramid. And they didn't realize they're literally damaging it all the time. So, but it wasn't just that. We found the bull and the calf. Also, on the right wall, you can find the exact same thing. And if you watch Codex, you can find all of this. But on the right wall, it's the position of Taurus. Now, why is the room shaped like a 2-to-1 rectangle? Because it's telling us about the 4 North Star positions. Maybe you could just play this part of the video real quick. It's telling us about the 4 North Star positions.
As we look into the night sky, we'll notice that all 4 of those stars together take the orientation of a 2-to-1 rectangle matching that of the King's Chamber. We'll also note that the original position of the sarcophagus, we strongly believe to have been the center of this room and structure, because even the Orion constellation itself takes on the same 2-to-1 rectangular form and shape, with the 3 belt stars exactly being framed by the proportional structure of the sarcophagus. What was in the sarcophagus still remains a mystery. Some believe this might actually be the place where the Ark of the Covenant was held before Moses took it out, and the astronomical symbols of the zodiac all being prominent flags and standards represented by the children of Israel in the encampment of the tabernacle, each representing the 4 faces of the 4 walls. The face of a man, the face of an ox, the face of a lion, and the face of an eagle. These are the four faces represented in the book of Ezekiel for the children of Israel and their encampment. Is the king's chamber telling us something more? That if the sarcophagus is in the right position, at its center point, covering the three belt stars, and we look around the room with each block having a different X, Y, Z axis, and each having a different constellation associated and tied to it, the 144 blocks tying together to the 48 constellations, we have to ask ourselves the question, is the king's chamber a stargate?
I believe it's a spiritual ascension stargate. The Great Pyramid, a lot of people say, oh, it's a power plant. It's a musical instrument. It's a place of burial, right? And maybe metaphorically, it's death, burial, and resurrection. Is it, a place of whatever else? The last thing I don't believe it is a place for pharaohs and mummies, and I don't think they ever found any mummies in them. It looks more modern, the pyramid does, on the inside than anything you would imagine to be several thousands of years old. It literally looks like it's built in the future. So that's why it's been so enigmatic for us. I believe all of those answers, save the one about the mummies, are correct. It's like what we're learning throughout this time right now is that everything we've learned is, we think it's fact, but actually it's more facet than fact. And just as people will argue about 432 hertz or 528 hertz, they're actually part of the same scale with a 24-note scale. And that's the 24-note scale that was used by the Egyptians, the 24-note scale that was used by the Arabs, this 24-note scale was used by the Indians. And when you understand that, then all these different discrepancies, whether it's Vedic, right? The Vedic mathematicians would say, okay, well, we're in the sidereal right now, but then the tropical astrologers would say, no, we're in tropical. But actually, both are correct. Once you realize your movement and your transit into your north node, then your transits become the sidereal transits. So all of this is united. What we're learning right now is all these different facets that we think are totally separate are just different facets of perception.
Mm-hmm. Encourage you guys to check out Code X on Gaia. Yeah. So there's 2 seasons out. Mm-hmm. What's going on with season 3?
We're going to be starting it pretty soon again. I'm actually on the board of directors of Gaia as well. I'm the only talent person that's on the board now, and I'm excited to be on it. So I'll be spending more time with the company and everything. But, I think the big message here, and what's the big aha of all of this, the pyramid is also acting like a clock, telling us about our 24,000-year cycle, and it's time for our awakening. It's like an alarm clock for us all. And it's telling us also about the cycle of death, burial, and resurrection for humanity as a macro cycle. It's not just for us as individuals. It's also about our own hero's journey path. And that's what Orion in the center of it represents. We're traveling through the zodiac. Time is both going forward and backwards at the same time. And the whole purpose of us to be here is just to learn how to love and how to be loved. And it's all about these emotions. We're here to feel. The only thing that's real in this world is what we feel. So just feel and realize there are no mistakes, and you have a reason for being here, and we all have a purpose. The one divides itself into the many simply for the joy of observing itself through our unique eyes of perception.
Thank you so much, Robert. You guys give him a hand. Yes. Thanks for listening to the Awaken Magazine podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and our other conversations, would you mind taking a moment to leave a 5-star review and maybe even a comment on Spotify or Apple Podcasts? That's one of the ways that you can give back to the show and help us reach more people. And of course, feel free to share the episode with a friend. And if you're not already on our email list, we send out an inspiring email every Monday morning full of articles and interviews. Just head on over to awakenedmagazine.com and click subscribe and join for free. Our hope is that all the resources we share will help our world continue awakening to love.